In 1881, archaeologists breached a hidden, unmarked shaft deep in the Egyptian desert. They crawled through a pitch-black, jagged tunnel, expecting an empty cave. Instead, they stumbled into dozens of the ancient world's most powerful monarchs. Rulers like Ramesses the Great were found here, crammed into wooden boxes and stacked like discarded firewood. For thousands of years, these rulers commanded the labor and lives of millions. Why were they treated like contraband and forced into a subterranean hiding spot? Every rule of Egyptian royalty dictates that a pharaoh rests in solitary, opulent splendor. These bodies were found out of place, out of time, and stripped of the very context meant to protect them. We usually measure pharaonic power by the sheer mass of the stone they left behind. Rulers commanded armies of laborers to stack millions of blocks to touch the sky, projecting immortal strength. That structural obsession began around 2667 BC. An architect named Imhotep decided a flat mud brick tomb was insufficient for his king, Djoser, so he stacked 6 massive stone tiers on top of each other. A few generations later, Pharaoh Snefru demanded flawless, smooth-sided geometric perfection. He poured the state's resources into a relentless process of architectural trial and error, pushing his engineers to build at dangerously steep angles. The laws of physics pushed back. You can actually see the exact moment Snefru's ambition met reality. The sudden change in pitch halfway up the structure was a frantic mid-construction correction to keep the collapsing walls from crushing the internal chambers. Achieving that eventual perfect pyramid required a logistical nightmare. The state had to feed tens of thousands of workers while quarrying, dragging, and precisely aligning millions of tons of limestone and granite, and they were building bank vaults. A pharaoh's tomb housed vast quantities of the empire's functional wealth: gold, rare oils, and imported timber, all locked away underground for a single occupant. By designing massive geometric beacons to house the national treasury, the pharaohs painted permanent targets on their own backs. They guaranteed that sooner or later, someone would come for the gold. The illusion of the untouchable god-king falls apart long before the stone does. Strip away the heavy granite and the mythology, and you are left with highly vulnerable, mortal flesh. During periods of fracture and civil war, these supposed deities bled like anyone else. The skull of Pharaoh II Enre-Tau was split open on the front lines by a foreign battle axe, his body hastily preserved before it could fully decompose on the battlefield. Physical weapons were matched by internal rebellion. In the 14th century BC, Pharaoh Akhenaten plunged the empire into chaos when he outlawed Egypt's ancient pantheon, firing the powerful priesthood to force the worship of a single sun disk. When Akhenaten died, the reaction was swift and violent. The population took chisels to his monuments, intentionally smashing his statues and hacking away his facial features. To an ancient Egyptian, this was a severe theological penalty. Destroying a person's image severed their tether to the afterlife, essentially murdering their soul for eternity. His people packed up and abandoned his newly built capital city, leaving its sprawling palaces to be swallowed entirely by the desert wind. The rulers of the Nile were entirely susceptible to the sharp edge of a bronze weapon, and equally defenseless against the accumulated rage of their own citizens. To mask this underlying fragility, subsequent rulers turned to extreme psychological warfare. Ramesses the Great decided the best defense was to become the ancient world's most aggressive propagandist. He projected strength by blanketing the empire with gargantuan architecture, carving his own face directly into sheer cliffsides at a scale that dwarfed human comprehension. This animated graph illustrates the mathematical reality of his reign. As you can see, the blue line representing the volume of his monument construction skyrockets over 67 years, while the yellow line tracking the empire's available treasury reserves plummets toward zero. Notice what happens right here. The sheer cost of maintaining military campaigns and funding stonemasons outpaces tax revenue, driving the state's wealth into a massive deficit. Ramesses built an intimidating facade, but it was funded on borrowed time, pushing the Egyptian economy toward total financial collapse. That insolvency arrived violently during the Bronze Age collapse. A cascade of drought, famine, and civil war swept across the Mediterranean, fracturing the Egyptian state and plunging the working class into pure desperation. Starving citizens needed resources, and they knew exactly where the gold was kept. They bypassed the heavily guarded cities and marched straight into the isolated canyons of the royal necropolis. An epidemic of organized tomb robbing swept through the valley. Gangs tunneled into the royal vaults, ripping through gilded coffins and melting down divine wealth to buy bread. Terrified priests realized the massive stone monuments had become death traps. In the dead of night, they quietly dug up their mummified ancestors, stripped away the remaining valuables, and dragged the bodies into the royal cache to protect them from further desecration. The pharaohs spent millennia forcing mountains to bend to their will, convinced that massive stone geometry would grant them eternal life. Those monuments ultimately failed them. It was the quiet, desperate act of hiding their fragile bodies in a dark hole that actually preserved them. And as we unearth them and speak their names today, we grant them the true immortality they sacrificed an empire to achieve.